Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome once again to Side Hustle Ideas. I am Bill, the company's expert. It has been a while since we did this. I took a couple of weeks off, and now I'm back doing the live stream. So welcome. This is the live stream I do weekly where we talk about entrepreneurship, because on my channel, normally I talk about how to get a job search, that kind of thing. And a component of that discussion is entrepreneurship, the idea that you're going to work for yourself. Okay, that is a thing. A lot of people do it. It's never been easier to do than it is right now. As we go increasingly into the future, more and more people are doing this. So I figured we would talk about it because it's actually more my core competency, building and growing businesses. So if you are here to learn about that, congratulations, you've come to the right place. As always, a shout out goes out to my members, my YouTube channel members. My Patreons, my super thanks donors, and of course to you, my viewers and my participants. You guys are awesome. Thank you for being here. And the title of today's episode of Side Hustle Ideas, episode 106, is The Hollywood Business Model. We're going to talk about something we don't normally talk about. We're going to talk about Hollywood. So here we go. Strap yourselves in. The Hollywood business model, then versus now. And if you're wondering why I'm talking about this, it's because Hollywood was traditionally a very entrepreneurial type thing. Films and stuff like that, their projects, they're very entrepreneurial. The people that are behind these films and projects, they go from project to project. It's very project-based and very entrepreneurial. And there's a reason why the Hollywood model worked for many, many years. Arguably, it does not work anymore. But rather than go into a political rant about that, we're going to talk about the business side of things, and I'm going to focus on what it was like. And we're going to talk in particular, I'm going to talk in this stream about 3 directors that you may or may not have heard of, okay? In reverse order, they are James Cameron. You may remember this dude. He did Avatar, he did Terminator, Terminator 2, Titanic, a whole slew of blockbuster films. Okay, so we're going to use him as an example to illustrate this. And then we're going to talk about 2 people that perhaps you haven't heard of. One is Roger Corman. He produced tons and tons and tons of low-budget films. So a different approach, okay? Known for doing very low-budget films, but popular low-budget films. Some of them are a bit controversial, but they're money makers, you know, and that's what we're going to be talking about. It's a different sort of take. And almost in a way, James Cameron and Roger Corman are 2 extremes, because James Cameron, I believe, was at the helm of the movie Titanic in 1997, which was, I believe, at the time, the most expensive movie ever made when it came out. And Roger Corman is like the other extreme. He makes some of the cheapest movies ever made that have been very successful. So we're going to talk about him. And then finally, we're going to talk about Sean S. Cunningham. And you get bonus points if you've heard of this guy. This is the guy who directed the movie Friday the 13th, a horror/slasher film, among many other things. But once again, they are all examples of entrepreneurship in the film industry, the way that Hollywood used to operate, certainly, and their business model. So we're going to dive into it. What can we learn? How can we apply this model, or some of the lessons and takeaways from this model? That's what we're talking about today. So as always, this is an interactive live stream. So if you are seeing my beautiful face right now, you should also see a chat box somewhere in the vicinity. And I understand that if you are watching this on a device, you should be able to get in the chat and interact if you've been a subscriber to my channel for any amount of time. If you're watching on a TV, that may not be possible, but if you're watching on any kind of device that you carry with you as you go about your day, as you walk down the street, you can whip it out and you can type in a comment to me. That's what this is all about. Okay, so let's get down to brass tacks, shall we? And as always, if you are looking to learn about business, but you don't want to break the bank and you don't want to take 2 years to go back to school, check out that course, the $100 MBA That's a course of mine where I walk you through this best bang for the buck around if you want to learn business. And in particular, you want to learn the tools to work for yourself and not be a wage slave your entire life. Okay, more about that later. Let's get down to it. So the Hollywood business model. Here we go. Let's talk about a couple of things. So where to start? How about this? You're a young person and you face a catch-22 that a lot of young people face. And in the world of job search that I normally talk about, for a lot of young people, that catch-22 takes the form of you want to get your first job or your first career job because you don't have experience. You're going for your first job, right? But nobody will give you a job without experience. And you can't get experience without getting a job. So it's a vicious cycle, right? The only way to get a job is to have had a job before. And as you can imagine, that creates this catch-22 type situation. And it is perplexing to a lot of young job seekers, right? We see catch-22s like this in almost every industry. Now, today we're talking about the film industry as an example of this stuff. And that existed there too. Namely, if you've come out of film school and you are a director or you are a set designer or a script writer or whatever, right? You want to get your first job. The problem is that you're up against this catch-22. Nobody wants to employ you. They don't want to take a chance on you because you are untried. So the only way to get, one of the director jobs or one of the set production jobs is to have things on your resume, have had those types of jobs before, right? Let's look at how a few famous filmmakers have solved that problem. Let's first look at the case of Sean S. Cunningham. You may have heard of this dude, you may not have. I picked him because he is an example, at least to me, of like a typical, moderately successful Hollywood type, director, producer. Okay, this guy was making films in the 1970s. That's where he started. He's old now. I believe he's still with us. And the 1970s were his formative years. He came out of film school and couldn't get a director job. He had been in film school to learn how to be a director, but directors direct films, and nobody's wanting a lot of directors, right? There's the supply exceeds the demand on directing films, right? Films with sizable budgets. So Sean S. Cunningham could not get a director job right out of school. That was the idea. Now, he drifted into being a producer, and he produced a very controversial movie. I believe it was called The Last House on the Left with a guy called Wes Craven in the 70s. Wes Craven directed that movie. He went on to get famous because he created the film series A Nightmare on Elm Street, these kind of popular horror type things. Anyway, so Sean S. Cunningham became a producer in the beginning, but he did direct a couple of films, and the first film he did was something called The Art of Marriage, where they made the entire movie for $3,500 US. So $3,500 US, they made this movie for, right? So very, very low budget film, but it made a remarkable box office gross of $100,000. So it took $3,500 to make, and its revenue at the movie theaters was $100,000. Okay, so I don't know what the math is. It's over 20 times the return on investment. So maybe 30 times the return on investment, something like that. You guys can do the math. Alpine's Pal is here. Says, "Good morning, Mr. Todd." Good morning, Alpine's Pal, and George Lucas and Tom Cruise. Yeah, other examples of, George Lucas is mainly a director. Tom Cruise is mainly an actor, but yes. Anyway, so we're talking about the business side of things. Now, Sean S. Cunningham, his first film, made it for $3,500 and it made $100,000. So already that is like an abnormally high return on investment. In the world of investing, where you invest in different industries and do different things, that's excessive. People would love to make that kind of return on things. Usually you don't see that. What's more typical, what's average, is about 5 to 10% return, somewhere in there in that range. That's more typical after a year, right? So you put your money in, you wait 12 months, you get between 5 and 10% return. That's sort of average, right? That's average for the economy. If you're a high net worth individual or an institutional investor, you can make more than that, but it gets riskier and riskier. So anyway, I don't know what 2857X means, but put that in your pipe and smoke it. So anyway, this was this first guy's project. Now he had experience with producing. Producing is almost like being a business manager, like running a project manager, where you're above the director. You're sort of, it's your project. So you decide everything about it. You decide what it's going to be about. You hire the director, you hire the script writer, you hire the casting people to determine the actors. You're the head honcho. It's your project. You sit on top of this organization that's making a movie, and it's your baby. What you say goes, So Sean learned that. Now, this was his first film. Based on the strength of this, what he did is he made $100,000 return. He invested something like $50,000 of that approximately into his next project, and then snowballed from there, right? So that was the idea. And the point is that these people did projects, their films, that achieved profitability. They made back their return on investment. And that's really the whole point of Hollywood, as it is with any other industry, right? You're in the entertainment industry, but you're not doing it for fun. You're doing it to make money because everybody needs to eat, right? And that's what these people did. So very project-based, very entrepreneurial-based, and you start small, but if you show that you understand what your market wants, what your customers want, in this case, moviegoers, that pays off, right? I'm going to flip the order of this a little bit. I'm going to talk next about Roger Corman, and then we're going to end off with talking about Steven Spielberg. Now, Roger Corman, you may or may have not heard of this guy. This very interesting character here. Instead of just being a director and making a handful of movies, like 1 or 2 every year, instead, this guy founded a production company and systematized his way of making movies. Okay? He made a ton of low-budget films. And he wrote, I believe he wrote his memoirs or an autobiography, something like How I Made 100 Movies and Never Lost a Dime, right? So he believed in low budgets. The idea was like, okay, you make a movie, it may not make much money for you, but if you can make the movie for less than the movie's revenue that it generates, then you're profitable, right? If you make a movie and it makes $50,000, that's not a lot for Hollywood. If the movie costs you $300 million and it only made $50,000 at the box office, you got problems. But if the movie cost you $1,000 to make and it made $50,000 at the box office, that's a tremendous success. That's a 50 times rate of return, And this was the idea that Roger Corman pursued. He said, I'm going to do it a different way. And it's going to consist of a low budget. So if someone gives me $100,000 to play with, I'm not going to make a $100,000 movie. I'm going to make 100 movies that each cost $1,000, right? I'm fudging the numbers, but you get the idea, right? Now, what does this achieve? First of all, it means that those films, in order to be profitable, they don't have to make a fortune. They just have to make more than $1,000 to be profitable, right? That's the first effect. The second effect is that you're diversifying your risk the same way you would diversify it in any kind of financial portfolio. You're not betting on one horse. You're making 100 movies. Some could be horror films, some could be drama, some could be comedies, some could be action, some could be westerns. I mean, I don't know what types of films they have these days. Some could be like, some kind of weird political think piece, whatever they make. I don't know. About 1 billion sequels that all suck, and remakes, etc. The idea is that you're diversifying what you're doing. Okay, so that has advantages too, right? Okay, so he believed in quality within constraints. Okay, they were filming movies, like they were shooting movies in just a couple of days with very small crews. They're producing something for cheap, but that thing was making many, many times back its initial cost. Now, because this requires a lot of people, he ended up being more hands-off. He started this and then spun it into a production company. Like I said earlier, he systematized what he did. So he personally wasn't directing, the films himself. After a while, what he would do is he'd hire the producer, hire the director, get them to pick the crew, right? And then just go, let me know if you need a hand. I'm going to check up on you guys occasionally, but just get it done, right? And go. And then he'd be sitting on top of the system where you have like multiple projects going all at once, right? That's how he operated. He launched the careers of many, many people because this requires a lot of people. He gave a chance to many young people that turned out to have like incredibly successful careers. Some examples are Francis Ford Coppola. Is that how you say that? I can never get that name right. Martin Scorsese, right? And James Cameron. These people all started. They were given their first big break working for Roger Corman in one of his like low budget movies, right? You seem to have some talent. You're right out of film school. I'll give you a shot. That kind of thing, right? So he had his like HR skills together where, almost like acting like a sports coach. He made good judges of character and said like, okay, I'll give you a shot at this, right? Once again, you can do that when you're making 100 films and, you're diversifying your risk, right? Okay, so great way to do it. And the people that turned out to really be able to deliver the goods, he would work with them again and again and again, right? That was the idea. Okay. So he had a deep understanding of what audiences wanted. That's the other thing. Okay, so that sense that all successful entrepreneurs have of, they understand their market, they understand their customers, they understand what their customers want, right? And knowing this, it allows them to make the right decisions when picking their teams, deciding what they're going to do with their projects, right? So he had a deep understanding of what audiences wanted and how to consistently deliver it. For example, the first movie that James Cameron worked on, the director who did Avatar and Terminator 2 and Titanic, it was a Roger Corman film. I believe it was called Piranha 2, I think he did Piranha 1. Roger Corman did Piranha 1. And then this was Piranha 2. And it was building on the success of the movie Jaws, right? With the shark. That was very, very popular. So we're going to do Piranha, and make it really cheap. And it made money, And that was James Cameron's first job directing a film. His next one was Terminator. So go figure. Over to you guys very briefly here. Ash has arrived. Ash has been successful with something. Right on, Ash. That's great. Star Wars sequels is a great example of that. Yeah, all those wonderful sequels they made that just keep getting better and better and more popular, right? And people love them for it too. I think they should do more. I think they're going to do more no matter what, no matter what could possibly happen. The whole Earth could be destroyed and they would still want to make another Star Wars sequel, right? It's a good idea to them. Anyway, so that was Roger Corman. Very unique approach to doing films. Very project-based, very entrepreneurial, and that's the way, Hollywood worked. There was the Hollywood formula, give the people what they want, have it make money, and the more profitable you are, the more the ratio between your revenue that you make and the cost it costs to, like the budget you have to make the film on, the better, right? Last example, Steven Spielberg. Everybody's favorite director, right? Steven Spielberg. I think isn't he supposed to be the most successful director of all time in terms of billions of dollars made off his movies and all this kind of thing. Steven Spielberg at age 13 made a 40-minute short film, okay, titled Escape to Nowhere. Just him, I think, and his brother or whatever. And it won first prize in a statewide competition. So even at age 13, you're showing enthusiasm and passion for this kind of work, and you're working on it. You're honing your skills. A lot of people that are into some kind of entrepreneurial activity, you want to go on your own, right? Develop your skills, do stuff, show that you're passionate. That was at age 13. At age 17, this is 1964, Steven Spielberg wrote, directed, and produced his first feature-length film, which was called Firelight, okay, about UFOs. The budget was $500. So a feature-length film made for $500, right? The film grossed $501 during its single night screening. I imagine you would sell 500 tickets at $1 a piece or some multiple, the math works out a certain way, right? There you go. You made back your money on the first day, right? It showcased his ability to manage a project from conception to execution, right? So in order to do this on the operations side, you have to be able to plan, you have to be able to organize, you have to have your HR kind of stuff together. You got to pick people that you can work with that are good, that know their stuff, they're reliable, et cetera, et cetera. So he had all that down by age 17. And then he was making money, right? From there, he moved into TV, directed a couple of episodes of TV shows, made his first movie. I can't remember what it was called. It starred Goldie Hawn. It wasn't a success. 1974. And then the next year, he made Jaws. Massive hit. Big budget success, mainstream success, and it was all sweet from there. Right? So that's how these people get started. What can we take away from this? I'll tell you what I take away from it. It reinforces a lot of the basic principles of entrepreneurship. Number one, have a sense for business. Okay. Like, for example, filmmaking is about, some people look at it and they see art. And I'm not going to challenge them on that. Yes, there's a certain artistic element. But other people look at it, they see business, because that's what it is, literally, in the world. You put money in, you get money out. That's a business, right? So, in order to gauge success in that business, you go off looking at it as a business, right? It's great to do something that's like an artistic triumph, and I'm not taking away from that, but in terms of making money, once you put money into the equation, it's a business, right? So having a sense of that from very early on, understanding that if you can do something that doesn't make a ton of money, but it costs less than it makes, that's a success. Now, if you can do that once, usually you can replicate it again and again and again and again. If you can do that once, sometimes you can multiply the numbers. So if you made a movie that cost $500 and it made 501 or 1,000 or whatever, can you do it by spending $50,000 and having it make $1 million? You know what I mean? Like, can you scale up? So one way to succeed is to replicate. Another way to succeed is to scale up. Sometimes you do a combination of both, right? These people showed a passion for this stuff early, and it broke the catch-22 that a lot of people feel, because they earned in to this business by taking this entrepreneurial approach. They didn't wait to be given a job by someone, in a lot of cases. they practiced what they knew, and they earned in that way, right? Now, it's the real world, so it's very fuzzy. There's a lot of gray areas, but that's kind of what I put out there. Let me know what you guys think. That's the end of my big sort of rant about this. Let's open it up to questions. Alpine's Pal is saying, I heard the original Star Wars films was cheap entertainment. Yeah, and now they're put on a pedestal as like some kind of eternal masterpiece, right? I think the reality is that it's somewhere between the two. It certainly wasn't cheap compared to a lot of other things at the time. I think science fiction, a lot of other people that made science fiction, like in the UK and elsewhere in the world, they couldn't compete with the budgets for things like Star Wars. I mean, I'm not a film expert, but that's just what I heard. Low startup cost, easy to do, proof of concept, employer recognition. Am I right? Well, I don't know about the easy to do thing. Okay. It's not just a matter of money in, money out. These people also had talent. They knew what to do to put a little money in and get more money coming out. Like that's the key. Now, in some cases, they were just touched by God. They were very talented from the very beginning. In other cases, they learned their craft, right? But that process of starting small and then ramping up, that really helped, right? So that's what I would say. I don't know about the easy to do, but most of the rest of that I think is valid, right? But the point is, it's project-based, and you're looking at it in terms of, its return on investment, right? That's the key metric for this kind of stuff, for project stuff, right? Now, for a lot of people, I'm going to take this and I'm going to sort of now draw some parallels here. A lot of people watching, a lot of people out there, you have skills. You went to school, you've had work experience, you have skills, and you know how to do things. You have certain capabilities. You can provide services to people, like, what you do, the work you do. You could almost be like a freelancer that goes and just provides whatever it is you do for a fee, right? That's definitely a thing. Now, in most cases, not everything, but in most cases, you don't need anyone's permission to practice what you know. So if you went to school to, say, learn how to do engineering, or customer service, or you're doing something more on the operations side, you're more of an engineer type, you know how to repair electronics or something, I don't know. You don't need anyone's permission to practice your trade or your core competency, your vocation. You can start doing that at a very small scale on your own. And by doing that, you can add value, you can create, it's an opportunity. You can showcase your talent for a start. You can solve problems for other people for another thing. And you also get better at what you do, right? By practicing it. So there's a lot of people out there that are between jobs right now, and entrepreneurship is a path for some people. It may not be fitting for everyone, but if you're one of the people where this is definitely you feel the pull or the calling or the interest of it, I would encourage you. One of the things that you should do, in my opinion, depending on your situation, if you are between jobs, obviously do a job search campaign, see if you can get a job, right? But in addition, if you're into this kind of thing, also kind of look at more entrepreneurial type activities, like being able to offer your services directly as a consultant or as a service provider, this kind of thing, and then start doing your own work to showcase it, to hone it, to refine it. Whether it has intrinsic value or it's just the sort of thing that says I can do this, or it's just something to add to your resume and say, I haven't had a career job yet, but I've done this. People that work with very visual type stuff, that's a no-brainer for you. If you're a designer or an artist, you can definitely do that. Build up a portfolio of things. Maybe you can sell them directly, or maybe they just build up your resume. But one way or another, it's a good thing. Alpine's Pal says, yeah, I get the idea. It seems like employers, or maybe people in general, mostly care about the success you can show or prove. Am I understanding that correctly? Well, there's a difference between employers and people in general. Those are two separate entities, right? So, for example, we were talking about Hollywood and films. Now, when you say people in general, I interpret that as being like moviegoers, people that go to see a movie and they pay for it, right? Okay. Now, what appeals to them is totally different from what appeals to an employer wanting to hire you as a director or whatever, right? If we're talking about films, okay. They care about the success that you can show or prove. So if you go to see a movie, you would want to see a movie, that is successful, that is entertaining, right? You want to see proof of this filmmaker's success, right? When I go see a movie, I want to see a movie that succeeds at being entertaining. That's my expectations for it. That's why I'm paying money to go see it. That's what I want delivered to me, right? Okay, so yeah, I want to see success. I want to see you doing your thing really well, right? Alpine's Pal says, I got to go for now. I'll catch up with that later. Yes. Excellent. But yeah, that's basically the idea, right? So, yeah, like, I think that this is something that illustrates several important tenets of entrepreneurship. I think that this is something that if you have a passion, if you have a talent, something that you do well, you should do it regardless of if you're trying to get a job working for an employer. If you want to be able to do it on your own and do it in a more entrepreneurial way, this is definitely something you should pursue. Contrasting this to the way Hollywood works now, I don't comment on Hollywood. I never have. That doesn't mean I can't. But I really get the impression, just based on stuff that I see in the media, I see, in the news and stuff like this, they're really giving the impression of that's not how things work now. They are doing some strange things by trying to turn marketing theory directly on its head. Marketing is the idea that we're going to give the customer what they want, right? Study of marketing is technically the study of groups of customers or potential customers. That's what it is. So how they think, how to find out where these people are, how to learn what they want, what they're looking for, what they would pay for, what price they would pay, this kind of thing. And then how to convince them to do business with you, right? That's marketing. Okay, so if people are looking for this and you deliver X for sale, like that thing that they're looking for the right price, they usually buy it, right? And getting them to connect. So making sure that they understand that you're there. They know of you and what you're offering. All of that's marketing, right? And it seems in the last 5 years, maybe more, there's been a lot of high-profile companies that have been sort of trying to rewrite the rules of marketing with disastrous results. Instead of trying to give people what they want, I get the impression that they're trying to force something on their customer base, but yet at the same time are then completely surprised when the customer base doesn't respond favorably to it. They stop buying it. That seems to be kind of the name of the game of the 2020s. It seemed like 5 years ago that was a real trend. It seems like right now we've kind of moved away from that because, surprise, surprise, it doesn't work. You know what I mean? You don't have a captive audience. These people are there because they want to be there. And the moment that they feel that you're not listening to them and you're not giving them what they want, they leave. That's how everything works. So Hollywood now, just from my amateur opinion, seems to be quite different from what it was in its heyday. The business model has been turned on its head, and the way producers and directors are placed in charge of projects is kind of the opposite of the way it used to be. And my understanding is that they are failing big time. When you look at the balance sheet of a lot of the major film companies, they are not succeeding. You know, the only reason they exist is because they've taken out massive, massive loans to fund what they're doing because they're spending more than they're making, right? Now, in this live stream, I've given you the example of 3 people who learned from a very early age how to deliver something that makes more than it costs and how to do that repeatedly and be able to scale it up, right? So anyway, I think this topic is interesting. I hope that you agree. If you want to learn business, if your ambition is to work for yourself, check out that course. That's my $100 MBA course, best bang for the buck around if you are looking to learn business. There's a link to it in the description, as well as a link to a video where I walk you through the entire course. It's like an FAQ, and not $100,000, $100 to learn the same material that you would learn in a 2-year Masters of Business Administration program in a brick and mortar university. Same thing. The reason I can do that is because you're basically getting a reading list and you're reading all the textbooks yourself. The same textbooks that when people take an MBA from Harvard, the same textbooks that they read, you're reading the same thing. So that's what they're learning in class, right? I have an MBA for what it's worth. I've read all these books cover to cover myself. I'm familiar with them. They're very good. These are some of the best books that are taught in some of the best leading universities around the world in their MBA programs. So that's what you're getting. And I've done many videos that guide you through it. So that's the idea. And the great thing is that there's no tests, no evaluations, no exams, nothing like that. So if you just want to skim through the entire thing, that's fine. If you are just interested in 1 or 2 areas of business, but not the others, that's fine too. You can do it on your schedule. You can do it to the depth that you're interested in, and you can do it in the areas that you're interested in, and that's it. So very, very versatile, all for $100. Check out the link in the description box under this live stream if you are interested. The more you know about business, which is the scientific study of making money, further you'll go. Right. If anyone has any questions, please let me know in the chat. I've basically come to the end of everything I had prepared to talk about. So unless there's any questions from people, I openly encourage you, if you have an interest in entrepreneurial type stuff, that means working for yourself, making money directly without needing to go through an agent like an employer, right? An employer, what it does is it turns your value into cash, right? Because you are not doing it yourself. You're not selling something directly to a customer base, right? So the employer says, listen, you have skills, you're valuable. Let's make an arrangement, okay? You don't know how to turn your skills and your value directly into cash. That's fine. You don't need to know that. Just come work for me. What I'll do is I will take care of that. I will turn your value into cash. I will take a cut and I'll give you what's left over. And they usually take more than 50% and give you what's left over, right? Now, a lot of employers, like big employers, they have economies of scale so they can turn your value into more cash than you might be able to do it on your own, okay? But then they take a huge cut of it. So the advantage of working for yourself, one of the advantages is that you get to keep all the pie, right? You don't have to give out 50 or 60% to another party for doing what you could do yourself. Now, is this for everyone? No, it's for some people. For some people, this is right. This is a real game changer. It's enabling, right? For other people, it's not your calling, and that's fine. But there's a lot of people out there that, they're working as employees and they're really not suited to be employees. They could be generating so much more value for themselves and for the world by doing their own thing and working for themselves. So for those people, that's who I'm wanting to reach today. Alpine's Pal says, awesome. Someone says, I have a question. I'm applying to a position in a prior experience, but I have the skills. How can I prove them? Okay, well, this is a live stream about entrepreneurship, so that's kind of outside the scope, but just for the sheer hell of it, let's talk about it very briefly. Okay, that's a good question. You see, job interviews are about talking about how good you are. That's what they are. You're not demonstrating anything in a job interview other than some of your soft skills, like, your charisma, your communication skills, things like that, right? Possibly conversational skills, things like. Aside from those, you're not demonstrating anything in a job interview. You're simply talking about how you have certain things, right? And that's a big challenge, right? Because there's a lot of talented people out there, but it's very hard to convince someone of your talent when you can't demonstrate it for them. There's many reasons for this. I'm not going to go into the reasons. I think you get the idea. Right? So, for example, you say cabin crew. So I'm suspecting this is like, in the airline industry, right? Maybe, I don't know, you're like a flight attendant or something like that, or I don't know. Anyway, let's take that as an example, okay? So they can't see you do your job as a flight attendant. So in a job interview, you have to rely on, references. You have to rely on recommendations. If they know someone who's worked with you and that person has recommended you, that can convince them, usually better than anything else. If you can't demonstrate it, what else? You can say, well, I have X many years experience, right? And that's usually the way recruiters think, right? That's what they have decided equates to a better employee, someone who has more years of experience. We all know that that's crap. That's not necessarily true. There's a lot of bad employees out there that have been bad employees for a very long time. Doesn't mean that they're better than you because they've been doing it for 20 years and you've been doing it for 1 year, right? Right? Anyway, the answer to this question is this is why a lot of people, you get a job through networking. It's just that simple, right? Because with networking, it's such a huge topic. It's hard for me to sort of like summarize it in just a minute. But one of the big concepts there is that you're not doing what you do in a job interview. You're not talking about how awesome you are to someone who doesn't know the job themselves. You're actually demonstrating it. So for example, if you sat down with a hiring manager, like someone who's the boss, who hires cabin crew and manages 200, 300 cabin crew, I don't know, you talk to that person, you talk to them about like how you've been, you have a conversation with them. And in the course of the conversation where you discuss topics about being on the cabin crew, they can see that you know your stuff. You're talking shop, you're talking about some of the advanced elements of being on the cabin crew, I don't know, right? So they can see it directly. So it's a different type of thing than doing a job interview. And everything runs on personal recommendations because in job interviews, people are hiring strangers. That's usually how that works. You post a job to the general public. The people who apply are strangers. You don't know them, right? So it's very hard to trust a stranger and believe that a stranger kind of knows their stuff. They could indeed know their stuff if they impress you, or it could be a very sophisticated act. You don't know, right? That's why people rely on personal references. If I've worked with someone's been a business partner of mine for 20 years, we've worked very closely together, I am reliant on them for my financial success because we're a team. And they tell me, oh, I should hire Nizark use 416 because they know what they're talking about. I've seen a lot of cabin crew, but I've worked with them. They're good. And I say, okay, I'm sold. If I trust you, and if you're telling me that they're good, you're staking your reputation with me by recommending them. Okay. Definitely. I will give them a chance and I will accept that, right? So that's how powerful, personal recommendation is. How do you get those? You get it by interacting with people. right? This is where, unfortunately, extroverts have a little bit of advantage over introverts because they enjoy that kind of thing more. Introverts are every bit as good at doing it, except that they don't enjoy it as much, so they tend to do it less, right? So anyway. So that's how you can prove that you're good, you know? Because when you can't demonstrate it, when you can't be a member of the cabin crew and wait on them on a plane, how do you convince someone you know your stuff? These are some of the indirect methods. That's the best way to prove it. The thing that comes closest to proving it, put it that way. Okay. Anyway, hopefully you guys found this episode on the Hollywood business model interesting. A little bit of a new thing for me. I don't really talk about this stuff, but it was an interesting sort of foray into something I've never talked about. Hopefully it was useful. You're welcome, and I apologize for bastardizing your name a moment ago. I'm terrible with names. Always have been, always will be. Thanks so much. I'm going to be back in just over an hour. I've got another live stream that's scheduled for an hour and 15 minutes from now, and that's where it's a general Q&A about jobs, job search, resumes, interviews, discovery of jobs, all that kind of stuff, offers, salary negotiation, you name it. I answer questions. I answer your questions on that stuff. That's happening in just over an hour. Come back on this channel if you want to talk about that. You got any questions? And after that, I will be live again on Wednesday, same time. Okay, thanks, guys. You take care. Check out my courses. Check out this course in particular for learning business. If you just want to get hired, check out my Get Hired course. Links in the description box below this live stream. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you soon.